Welcome back to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today I want to try something different. I'm going to publish this episode on Monday. I'm filming it on Friday, September 12th. And I just want to cover the news from last week and kind of see how that goes as a different format. I already don't like it too much, but I do have some interesting stories I want to bring. And I want to focus on stories that people aren't covering that much, or angles of stories that people are covering that they're not covering. And so, of course, we got to start with Charlie Kirk because that's the most important thing happening in the news. They found the shooter, of course, last night, which would be Thursday night, and I don't really want to go into the details of it. There's a lot of incongruities, but we'll go into those later, like after we've seen a lot more stuff. I want to go into a couple different aspects of this. The first one I want to cover is the idea that Charlie is at fault for what happened to him. And this is a lot of the response videos on the college campuses, a lot of this on Twitter, and it's complete and total nonsense. And this is going to tie into Thursday's episode. Let me break this down for you. I'm going to put a tweet up on the screen. I don't really care about who this guy is or whatever, but I care about the idea that he's trying to push, because a lot of people on Twitter are trying to push this. And I'm going to show you how illogical and just immensely immoral this is. Okay, so this guy puts up a tweet of Charlie Kirk, and he says, by the way, according to Charlie Kirk's logic, his death is his own fault, not the shooter's. I don't agree with this. Okay, Charlie Kirk's tweet: the deaths of women and children in Gaza are the fault of Hamas, not Israel, just like the deaths in Japan during World War II were the fault of Japan, not America, even though America killed them. When a government engages in unprovoked murderous aggression, they are to blame for everything that results. Okay, so Charlie Kirk's kind of making the argument like, okay, so the U.S. put troops in Saudi Arabia, so bin Laden is completely justified for doing what he did at 9/11, what he's claimed to have done at 9/11, because America's doing it. It's a stupid argument, right? But because Charlie Kirk makes this stupid argument, because Charlie Kirk did great things, but he completely supported the genocide, the death of civilians. I'll just be nice. I'll say the death of civilian women and children in Gaza. He completely supports that, right? We look at that and we say, okay, objectively, there's a reality, right? And objectively, it's not good to end women and children anywhere in the world. It's just not a good thing, If it's a child soldier and they're pointing a gun at you, that's different. But just women and children are off limits, right? So the kind of logic we're using here, not Charlie Kirk's, because Charlie Kirk had terrible views on Zionism, on Israel, and everything, even though he was coming around towards the end. But whoever this is, Hassan Mafi, his view is this, right? Israel is doing something wrong by ending the civilian women and children in Gaza. Therefore, it's justified to end the civilian women and children in Israel. That's the kind of argument he's making. But it's not. If we're objectively correct that these civilians should be sacrosanct over here, the other civilians should be sacrosanct either. Otherwise, you're just Israel. The Israeli government under Netanyahu, the specific Likud government, you are them advocating for the same thing. You're morally no better than them. So this can be applied to the argument of, so people say Charlie Kirk was a racist, and then they quote a bunch of things that he said. Okay. And then end the racist, because if you're making that argument, you're saying that white people should go into the Nation of Islam churches and end them because they're black people who are just openly racist. Yeah, you're allowed to be free to be openly racist. It might hurt you in your job prospects. It might hurt you in this, but you don't justify the ending of your life. I'm sorry. So I disagree with Charlie on Zionism. I disagree with all these people saying that he deserved it, because morally, you can't say that. There's objectively what's okay and what's not okay, and civilians are off limits. Charlie Kirk was a civilian in open debate at a public forum, which is a noble thing to do. Okay, so the second thing I want to talk about this is the response of all these college kids that I mentioned earlier, where they're the ones who are celebrating this happening, and you look at it and it's really disgusting what they're doing. And the reason why it's disgusting is because if you're a decent human being, you believe in an objective reality that there's something real out there, and there's these traditional values such as family, children, nuclear family, extended family, et cetera, and you look at it, you think, as a decent human being, you say, well, his wife and kids, this is terrible, right? But it's important to note that these people who've been indoctrinated in these colleges and stuff, they see these things as the problem. Like the wife and children are also the problem. Because see, you got the patriarchy and you got the nuclear family, and it's probably white supremacy because they're a bunch of white people, and so the things that you look at and value and say, oh, this is tragic because of X, Y, and Z, they're looking at X, Y, and Z as the problem. And I'm going to tie this into Thursday's episode some more. These are the two main things I want to take away on the Charlie Kirk story. Now, Charlie Kirk did a phenomenal thing for the United States, even though I told you I disagree with him on the Zionism thing. But he was the number one influencer of these kids at these schools. And I'm not saying that he was convincing the far left ones who he argued with on the microphone, but there's maybe a 20% in the middle who are looking back at their parents' values and then are looking at these college values, and then they make a decision based on these psychos saying this crazy stuff to Charlie and him saying this really rational stuff. Because he wasn't like a Ben Shapiro who was going there to, what was that? He always say he's, roasting the 18-year-olds, or something, like he's going to really show them with his, But Charlie wasn't doing that. He was engaging with them and trying to win them over. But even if it's not them, he was trying to win the ones who were in the middle, the ones who were susceptible to be convinced. Okay, so I got a couple interesting clips to show you about these different protests that I've seen that are kind of unusual in a certain degree. Like a lot of times the problem is with the anti-genocide protests, you just see a bunch of communists with their People's Library and their unshaven, unclean bodies, or they look like foreigners. They're definitely waving foreign flags. They've done things in the past like taking down American flags and putting up foreign flags. It's terrible optics. If I was running the thing, it would be all American flags. It would just be Christians against genocide, Muslims against genocide, Americans against genocide, all American flags, anyways. But so there's a couple of interesting protests, and the first one I want to show you is the one that I haven't seen a lot of people reporting on. But basically there was a hearing at the Senate Committee of Foreign Relations, and they were just doing this kind of obscure hearing where they were vetting some non-important, non-controversial positions like the ambassador to Costa Rica, and some others, but there's nothing in there spicy. And these two veteran military officers come in and they start making a protest, and then I don't have a video of that protest, but they then cuff them and take them out in the hall, and then these people say some spicy stuff out in the hall, right? And this is wild. This is real, definitely real. And I'll just show you this. It's a short little video and see what you think.
Every American sitting at home right now needs to realize that you are paying for a genocide. Take this one. Rise up, America, rise up. It is time to take back this country from these corrupt politicians. It is time. It is beyond time. We're going out to the loaded dog.
So these are veterans and they're not on active duty, but I'm sure they have contacts. And when they're saying that Americans should rise up because it is a full genocide, I think that that's pretty interesting, because you see it and you're like, wow, there might be something to this, and it's more compelling than seeing the communists with the foreign flags, or the, wearing the keffiyehs and stuff like that. Now I got another one for you, and I'm not sure how interesting this one is, but basically Trump, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, I believe Marco Rubio's there, and they go, no, I don't know if Marco Rubio's there, but it's like a head group, and they go into a restaurant in D.C. and they get chanted at, we'll say. And now I don't know if this is Code Pink who had found out their itinerary and then showed up at the restaurant, so that would make it less of an interesting story because people have less sympathy for Code Pink. If it's just some people there who are green, but see they pull out Palestinian banners, so I don't know if it's arranged or not. Nonetheless, it's got to be a little embarrassing because, I even saw a video the other day where J.D. Vance was driving down the road, and then there was it was pretty funny. There was a whole group of protesters lined up, and then they said, whoop, and drove to the other side of a grass berm, and all the protesters had to run over because they were just like, we're going to ignore these people. We see them everywhere we go. We're not interested in, what this part of America thinks. And so let me play this little clip for you.
Happy to see you. Enjoy your dinner. Thank you.
Anyways, I just think it's interesting to see a couple clips of protesters who aren't the communist type that everybody detests. And if you don't detest them, I mean, I don't detest their message, the anti-genocide message, but like it's impossible not to detest them. And so therefore it muddies their message, which is just terrible. Okay, let's go on to some other stories. Okay, I don't know what order I want to do. So let's do an update on the one from the Israeli pedo in Las Vegas. I said I'm going to stay on the story, and I'm going to. So last we left off, we did an episode on it. I'll put a link in the description if you don't know about this one, but he was caught up in a sting, trying to get an underage kid to go out with him, as well as 7 others, including a pastor, and he's Israeli cybersecurity, and he was released on bail, went back to Israel, and then they said, hey, you got a hearing coming in a week or 2. You got to come back for it. And of course, we had laughed and said he'll never come back for it. Of course, he never came back for it. Instead, he hired the most expensive, prestigious lawyer in Nevada. Where he got the money for that is anybody's guess. But he hires this lawyer. The lawyer shows up at the hearing, and the judge says, where's your client? And he says, don't worry about that. I advise him not to come because I've already made a deal with the district attorney. Of course you have. And the judge says, no, this is not your courtroom. This is my courtroom. It's a requirement of his bail for him to show up. Where's your client? No, we got this deal and this and that. So then the judge caves and says, okay, well, we'll redo this hearing next week, and your client can do a virtual hearing, even though the requirements of his bail are that he shows up at the hearing. So they do the hearing a week later, and they basically put this off until December 22nd is the next hearing. So I'm going to do another update sometime around Christmas or after, I don't know, depending on taking time off or whatever. And I will stay on the story, though, because I want to see what happens to him. I want to look in retrospect about what the penalties for the 7 were compared to what this Israeli guy gets, if he gets preferential treatment. If I was a pro-Zionist system and I was in charge right here and I was trying to let this guy off, I would let all 7 have low sentences so that when you give the sweetheart deal to the Israeli guy, it doesn't look suspicious. They might be stupid and go after the 7 hard, which would make for a juicy story. We'll see how that goes. That'll be December 22nd. That'll be down the road. And if you're still following along, I'll be covering it. Okay, let's go to something completely unrelated to that. So there's a story a week ago, and it was Trump blowing up the speedboat from Venezuela with 11 Tren de Agua gang members on it and a bunch of drugs. And so this kind of just went through the news and passed, and nobody talked about it. But are we just blowing up boats now? Just boats from other countries? Is this what we're doing? Because, I mean, this is insane. So there's zero due process involved in this. The government just tells us that the people on the boat, they're all bad guys. Every one of them are bad guys, and there's a lot of drugs on there too. Okay. I mean, since when is drug smuggling a capital offense? I mean, if you're in the Philippines, I think having drugs, I know making drugs, they'll kill you for, but is that just our new international rule? That's how we're going to do it? Because when they call you a fascist and then you do this, and I'm not saying I'm even against this. I'm saying in our system, the way to pull this off and have the optics to do it is terrible. You have the boat. You're following the boat, by air. You can't interdict this boat because that's how things are done. You interdict the boat. You see, are they gang members? Oh, all 11 are gang members. Is there a lot of drugs? Oh, there's a lot of drugs. Cool. Seize the drugs, arrest the people. That's how it goes. You don't just willy-nilly just start blowing people up. That's something that you would think they would claim Venezuela blew up a boat. They don't know what was on it, but they blew it up, Or it's almost like saying, hey, this passenger liner has guns in the cargo hold. Oh, it's called the Lusitania. We've done that before. I don't know. I think nobody even covered how ridiculous this is that he did that. It's so outside the scope of anything. Even in a movie, they don't do stuff like this. I'm thinking back to Clear and Present Danger, or different movies where they interdict boats like that and find stuff on it. I think it's absolutely absurd. I just want to point that out. Let's go foreign. There's a lot of interesting stuff happen in Nepal. I'm going to play a video for you, and it doesn't have any audio, so I'll just play it while I talk. But they're so corrupt in Nepal, and they basically they are so corrupt, and they get all this money, the politicians, and then they show their supercars on social media and their big mansions and stuff like that. And the people get more and more furious. So as the people got more furious and started protesting, they then passed a law to shut down social media. They shut down Facebook. They used a technicality. Facebook had missed a day by one on registering or something. The protests heat up. They reinstate social media 24 hours later because they realize that it's over. They're just ruined. And then they do this. I'll put it on the screen for you. They basically rush in and burn down their own parliament. Then they go through town and they go mansion to mansion, and they burn down these mansions and these supercars of all these politicians. The politicians that they find, they toss them in the river. Wait, they don't just murder them outright, even though they hate these people, like Trump did with the drug boat, you know? Even the politicians who were completely corrupt and who were destroying their country. Nope, they threw them in the river. So anyways, the ones at Parliament escaped via helicopter, and these people are just fed up. And I think it's an interesting story, because if you really look at it, the lines between how much power the government has in any given society it's really much thinner than they make you think it is. Anyways, I think it's interesting to see what happened there, because there's a lot of uprisings going on, and they've gotten rid of their government. And in this situation, we'll see. The problem is, like, I would love to be the Nepalese person who's already has stuff in place for this eventuality. Where scholars have already got together and put together a proto-constitution, like a format for what we want for the new. But the problem is if there's a void and the void gets scooped up by like some corrupt communist or something, that's not going to be an upgrade. And so I would like to be on the side that is already prepared for this eventuality. So other foreign stuff that happened in France, they're doing the block anything protest. And so what happens is, Macron had this prime minister, and the prime minister tried to push through this. It's unclear. There's multiple reports, but it was between 40 and 60 billion dollars in austerity measures. And those are meant because the problem is the big deficit in France. And so it was just a bunch of things like cutting out holidays, paid holidays, just a bunch of things that hurt the workers in order to make up for their overspending and other stuff. Like I'll look it up after this episode, and I'll put it on the screen. How much has France spent on Ukraine? But I imagine that they need that money for their own people, but they're giving it away to somebody on the far side of their continent. So anyways, so the people are out protesting. There's 80,000 police out there, and they're just trying to block all the roads and stuff like that. The prime minister who pushed for the austerity measures, he's been sacked. They're bringing in a new guy, and he might come up with something this weekend to quell this, or it might get worse. As of filming this on Friday the 12th, Macron is not interested in stepping down. He's still trying to restore order, even though 67% of the French people want him to step down. I think it's an interesting story to watch. Again, the power that the people have is much more than they think that they have. Okay, a great foreign story too is the AFD. So I did an episode on this a long time ago. I'll put a link to that in the description if you haven't seen it. But they basically were at 40 something seats in the Bundestag, which is their parliament. And then they had an election where they got up to 80 something, which was really impressive. So then the elections were coming up a couple days ago in September. And there was the story that 7 AFD politicians had died in 13 days leading up to the election. And they had died, all of them from heart attacks, natural causes, stuff like that. The ages, the 2 youngest were both 59. There were some in the 60s, some in the 70s, one in the low 80s. And police are not looking into any of it. It's just all natural causes and stuff. They also weren't going for the federal parliament, the Bundestag. They were going for small positions. Still kind of suspicious. Could just be happenstance. Unclear. Then the results of the election is that they won again. And they went from in the 80s to seats in the Bundestag to over 150. Now, they don't have power or a coalition that has power, so they're still out of power, but they're at 150 seats. Now, I'm unclear about German politics, how this works, but I do know that every time I look at this, the number of total seats changes, so it is variable based on some rules that I don't comprehend, but I'm not really interested in. So basically, the number of seats went up from the high 600s, so they had 80-something out of the high 600s. Now they have 150 something out of the low 700s. So it does change during the elections. So I think both of those parts of the AFD story are interesting. Okay, let's come back to the US. I want to do an Epstein update. And I found this really interesting video, right? So back when we had Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, and they said, hey, we're going to show you this video. It's going to be of Epstein's cell. You're going to see that nobody went in and out, right? So then they showed us that video. But what I didn't comprehend, even when I made a video about that, is that the cell door you're looking at is not Epstein's cell door. Epstein's cell door was downstairs, and it was the very first door closest to the guard station because he was on suicide watch, remember? And so what that video of looking at that door is trying to show you, it's trying to show you that nobody went down the staircases to get to his cell. So nobody came in and out of his cell is what they're trying to say, right? And basically, I'm going to overlay this video right now that this guy did where he made a map of the entire cell block. And what you can see from the video is that there's a staircase that's completely out of view that goes to Epstein's cell. So everything and I'm just going to link this guy's whole YouTube video. It's not that long. It's like 5 deceptions about, I don't remember the title of it, but I'll have it under references below if you want to watch it, and you should watch it. It's good. But basically, they could have easily, somebody could have went in and out. Epstein could have went out. Somebody could have came in to do something. I'm not making any claims here. I'm just saying that Patel and Bongino completely lied about what the content of that video was, so that when I was watching it, I wasn't understanding that it was those staircases that mattered, and one of the staircases out of view, so the video doesn't even matter. Then you remember how they had that 1 minute left out? Well, it turned out to be like 3 minutes, but whatever. Well, they ended up, there was like 40,000 documents released, and they ended up releasing that minute, and sure enough, it shows somebody during that 1 minute, which is really 3 minutes, dressed in black going up the staircase that you can see, the one on the right side of the screen. So that happened. They had the releases from the birthday book. It's so much disgusting stuff, even from Donald Trump. They had said he had done some, put this birthday message to Jeffrey Epstein that's so weird. And on like a prepubescent body is the outline. I'll put a picture of it up on the screen. I really don't want to read it, honestly. But there's so much disgusting stuff in that book. I really don't want to go over it. He was a terrible dude. And what the book just shows is that everybody who knew him knew what kind of terrible stuff that he was into. Like, it wasn't a secret. There's literally, if I can find a cartoon that somebody drew him of him grooming girls, it's disgusting. So I want to talk about this thing that nobody's been talking about. It's kind of a weird story. It's called Qatargate, right? And so Qatar, obviously in the Middle East, is prominent because they have a large military U.S. base there, and they're Sunnis, unlike the Shiites at the in Iran, and Hamas, Hezbollah are all Shiites, and so they're Sunnis, and the other big Sunni state is Saudi Arabia, and so Saudi Arabia beats them on every metric of like population size, GDP, etc. Not per capita income. Qatar wins there, but Qatar is always struggling with also Sunni Saudi Arabia for prestige and stuff like that. And so basically what happened is there's a thing called Qatargate where Qatar started spending money to bribe politicians in order to make Qatar look better. So that if there was going to be like a 3-way, U.S., Zelensky, and Putin meeting to try to add a third-party neutral area, hopefully they can get it in Qatar because it increases their prestige in the world, right? Which is difficult to do because they're also the primary funders of Hamas. And regardless of whether you like the killing of civilians, men and women in Gaza, but nobody really likes Hamas. There's even the anti-genocide people don't like Hamas. Like Hamas, like in favorability in the world is a terrible start. They're the primary funders of Hamas, funneling up to $1.8 billion to them lifetime. And I tried to figure out why, and it's kind of like they want to be a power player in the region. It's kind of the answer that I got from my research, and that doesn't seem too conclusive to me. So I'm not really sure on that. They were also the ones, if you recall, in September 2023, right before the October 7th, 2023 attack, that Netanyahu's government has also funneled money through Hamas, but when they did it through Qatar, right? Because Qatar allows some Hamas officials to live there. But they're on the political class, so they're not on the military side. So these are like the negotiators, like you remember the Hamas negotiator that Israel assassinated in Tehran, Iran, and like that kind of guy. And just the other day, they did an attack in Qatar. A sovereign country just did a bombing there, and a country obviously that we have a large military base in, to try to assassinate somebody who's a political person. Maybe the person trying to get the peace deal, because every time there's a peace deal, But let's go back to this Qatargate. So basically what happened is Qatar was just putting money out there. And, okay, before you want to go to the thing that, I'm just going to say this one time in this one video. If If you're one of the people who comment in the comments and say, hey, but Qatar is funded by the United States. Qatar is not funded by the United States. They get very little money from us. The whole thing about the universities is a complete hoax. They pay for all that. There's a really good video on it. I'll put it in references below. It's by Leather Apron Club, who I've referred in my videos before. I'm not going to ever make a video on it. I'm going to leave it to him. He does great work. No, the U.S. does not fund Qatar or their universities. It's not a thing. They're paying that money for the prestige of having a branch of those universities, and he's got all the data on it. So I'll put that in the description below. So basically what they did is they paid the vice president of the European Union, a Greek citizen, an undisclosed amount of money to try to get some optics gain of pro-Qatar influence. And then she got arrested, and she's now out on bail for that. But the most recent, so it was, I don't think it was Qatargate back then, because that was just a standalone scandal. But recently what happened is two of Benjamin Netanyahu's aides in Israel got arrested by the Israeli police for taking bribes from Qatar. And so now as a whole thing, it's kind of become Qatargate. And so they took up $10 million, and one of them is they're both important, but one of them is real important. He's the head of Netanyahu's media. So he's the guy who figured out, like, we should do this whole video. We should have a cup of water here. You should drink the cup of water. Then you should say, hey, Iran, you like water? We got water. You know what I mean? So he does all the optics on that, and he does speech writing, and he approves speeches and stuff like that. So he's a very important guy. And what they did is they paid him $10 million just to make Qatar look good. So fluff pieces, the wording of a Netanyahu speech, like that's prime influence if you can get in there, you know? So anyways, that happened. And I don't think this story is incredibly interesting just from an American perspective, because it's like, okay, Qatar's paying money to get their image better. Okay, I don't blame them. You know, they're the funders of Hamas, so they kind of got to do that. And then there's corrupt, you know, Israeli politicians and EU politicians who are taking the money. Yeah, I mean, it has nothing to do with the United States, because the United States funds Israel, but not Qatar. But then the people that we're funding are also taking money from these other people to promote their interests. I mean, just whatever. I think it's interesting to keep an eye on, though, and watch, because there might be more relevant stuff that comes out of it. And yeah, okay, let me do one more story, okay? So there was this story that came up, and I think it's relevant because, I mean, the most recent episode that I did, and I apologize that it was a day late, was on me rating Trump's immigration policy so far. But I had forgot to upload it on Thursday, so I did it on Friday. My apologies. But there was a story that came up. Boy, it's the most dreadful story. Basically, the United States has pressured these other governments to build their plants in the United States. Good. Create American manufacturing. Trump promised that. Good. Okay. So then they're like, we're gonna build this Hyundai plant. I'll link a article below if you want to read more about this. But basically, what happened is they sent in their South Korean workers, but they couldn't get visas for them because Trump's government is being hardliners with giving out visas. But these are the people you want to give visas to, because they're going to set up the plant. They're not going to work it. They're just going to set it up, train people who are Americans, and then leave. And then you guys got this. You can probably call customer support, you know, in India or whatever. And just joking. But so these guys come on a visa waiver program, whatever that is, but that's not quite legal, it seems. And so they're doing this plant, and then they're putting it together basically. And then ICE comes and raids them, and then arrests hundreds of these South Koreans, changes them up, films them chained up, posts the chained up video to cause an international crisis with South Korea, because we wanted the plant. We wanted them to come set up the plant. We were too inept to give them the visas to set up the plant. Then we arrested them for not having the right visas when they come to set up the plant so that American workers can have more jobs. I mean, it's a disaster. It's sheer stupidity that there's nobody along the way who can take a call and give these guys good visas. I mean, I feel like you should be able to send your people here illegally with their, you know, waiver. And then you could call ICE and report themselves. Hey, there's 300 illegal immigrants. They're going to be here for a couple months. They're setting up a plant so that American workers can have good jobs. Here's exactly their location. Don't go there. You could go there and look with one agent, but like, we're doing this for Trump himself. You can't pull it off at the last second, or you can't realize what a disaster it is at the end and not chain them up, or you chain them up and you take the video, and at the end there's just somebody who's like, man, I don't think we should post this. No, none of that exists. And that's disappointing, because I want Trump's immigration policy to succeed. I want him to deport as many illegal immigrants as possible. I want him to leave the Hyundai workers alone until now. If they finish their project in 3 months and you find some of them in the country 7 months later, then there's no excuse for that. Chain them up and deport them. I'm cool, because you're overstaying your visa after you've already done the charge, which we really want you to do, you know? Anyways, that's what I've got for you. This is kind of my first try at this type of I've never done this type of a thing where I just kind of go through the interesting stuff in the news. I would be interested in your opinion below in a comment if you like it or dislike it. I'll tell you the reason why I don't like it, and I'm unlikely to do it in the future. It's because the problem is I come home from work midweek, and then I'm stressed while at home, still trying to keep up. When I'm at work, it's easy to keep up with the news, and I'm at home and I'm trying to spend time with my kids and my wife and stuff like that. But I'm still trying to keep up with the most, because I mean, the day I came home from work is the day that happened to Charlie Kirk, and I seen it a couple minutes after, and I've been following it ever since. And the problem is, I'm losing quality, valuable time with my family before I have to go to work today. And also, the problem is if I produce it, because I've got to do it today, if I'm going to release it, because I'm going back to work and I won't be at the studio. But the problem is, if there's huge stories, what if there's 4 more things like the Charlie Kirk thing that happened, and they're going back and forth this weekend, and I make this episode and I'm not even covering it, you know, and it's like, this isn't current events. Anyway, so that's kind of my problem with it. If I could produce it the day that I did it, I'd be more likely to do it in the future. But I'm interested in your opinion, what you think of it. Thursday, I'm going to do this episode, and I don't even know how it's going to be titled yet, but it's about this idea that I talked about earlier, that there's an objective reality, that there's right or wrong, and then there's these people on the planet, this one group of people who don't believe in objective reality. They just believe that everything they believe subjectively is true because they say so. And then the conflict in the two worldviews, I'm going to give a lot of examples of how we see it in social media, how we see it in just the different weird stuff that doesn't make any sense that's going on in our society, and why that's subjectively related, even though objectively it's nonsense. Anyways, that's what I got for you. Hope to see you Thursday.